Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PRUK radio network. I nearly forgot that then. I'm your host, Paul Wilkin. As always, we are joined in the studio by the stupendous Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been all right. Yeah. Nothing major, but, just ticking along.
Cool. And Kerry?
Exhausted.
Oh, Kerry's tired again.
I'm working like a dog.
Yeah, apparently you work in retail. Is that
apparently
right?
I do.
Yeah. I can imagine that's quite stressful.
Strenuous.
Yeah, having to deal with awkward customers and all that.
I think my expression I have 4 hours and I have to be nice for 4 hours. That's all. No, it is fine. It's just a little bit tiring. I've been, busy girl, but it's good. It's all good. Better to be busy than in the doldrums of lockdown, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's all a thing of the past now, isn't it? It's like it never happened.
It certainly is. I know. I mean, there is times I think I could do with another one, but I also firmly in mind of how bored I was in the last one.
Yeah, but just think about the amount of research you've done during the lockdown.
It was easy. I had all the time in the world to do it.
Absolutely.
I'm now trying to drag myself back. I'm still trying to drag myself back into normal pre-COVID life. Do you know what I mean? It's really weird.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. We'll all get there. It's fine.
How did I manage my life before? Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah.
It's only been a year, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all good in the head. It's all good in the head.
Absolutely. So, what are we discussing tonight then?
Well, my lovely little Richard, he's a bit of a buff, as we know, behind the scenes of history. He loves his history.
Yes,
and
he does.
He likes a bit of a battle, doesn't he?
Always.
Oh, yes. Both reading about them and even taking part in them.
So when did you take part in them? What did you do?
I was a member of the English Civil War Society back in the day, and that was one of these battle reenactment groups, and we would go away for weekends up and down the country recreating famous battles.
Do you know what? I've actually seen you recreate one of the battles, and it was the Weetabix advert.
Yeah, that's right.
We will share the link to our Facebook page, folks, so you can see the advert that we're talking about, because we don't let this one drop with our lovely Richard, bless him.
No, you don't.
So what was it about that particular period of history that really interested you?
Well, it's the first thing that actually sort of came up, and I had a friend who used to do it before I joined, and he goes, "Oh, you've got to come along, it's great." And I did, and I sort of spent about 13, 14 years actually doing it all through the 80s and into the early 90s. So, yeah, most of my weekends were spent here, there, and everywhere, and sort of thinking back on it, I've sort of slept in castles, old manor houses, you name it. We used to do it, So it's quite, sort of looking back, you sort of think, wow, and it was a good time. And I'd done it right up until I actually moved and emigrated to Australia for a few years. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
It sounds really wicked. So would you say you actually have like a bit of an understanding of what it must have really been like back in the day?
Yes, I'd like to think I do. It's sort of not so much, you can't really recreate, we did have, mod cons when we used to go, we used to have like a campsite set up, a modern campsite, away from the public. So we did have basic amenities and stuff like that, and a beer tent. You had to have a beer tent.
Obviously.
Destroy the illusion for us.
Yeah, but we used to do things, we used to either have battles, or we used to do things called living history, where we used to go into, like, say, a castle and sort of set it all up like it was, or like it it would have been sort of back during the times of the 1600s, during the English Civil Wars. So yeah, we used to cook authentic food then, and which isn't too nice, to be quite honest. And yeah, we sort of, you get an inkling of what it'd be like.
Yeah,
So-
I must admit, I've been to one of these reenactment days, and it was at Kenwell Hall in Sussex.
Oh yeah,
is it Suffolk?
no,
Sussex?
Suffolk, Kentwell.
Suffolk. I know it's something like that. And one thing that impressed me was this little 5-year-old girl walking around in full dress outfit of the period, and she was giving us so much information on if you sting yourself on a nettle, you got to get this leaf, and she was showing us the dock leaf.
Oh yeah.
So, and I thought, for a 5-year-old, and she's in character as well, I thought that was absolutely amazing.
Oh, bless her.
Yeah, we used to have things like that. I remember I had a 17th century phrase book. Somebody had sort of taken time out to sort of like look up sort of phrases and words which aren't in use today, but would have been commonplace during the 17th century. So, yeah, you got what you put into it. You got out of it and what you were sort of like prepared to put into it. So, yeah, it was good.
So, in regard to the actual battles that you would recreate,
Mm-hmm.
how do they know how a battle unfolded? I mean, obviously you know who the winner was because that's written down in the history books. But like, a battle's not as easy as two people join.
Yeah,
they're not straightforward, are they?
No, you sort of read up on the battles. I mean, a lot of battles would have been chronicled, and those are the only accounts you've really got to go on. So yes, you sort of there's a bit of artistic license. You can't sort of recreate it exactly, but you would take certain points and you would sort of like split the battle up. Say for that day, if it was the Battle of Edge Hill, which we'll be going on to in a minute, you would there was about there's about 4 points during that battle. You had the start of the battle of how the armies actually clashed into each other. They sort of just stumbled into each other. They were circling each other for about a good month before they actually met, and they actually met by accident. We would recreate sort of marching along, and then suddenly the other army would appear on the hill, and then the battle would sort of evolve from there. And there were certain sort of points in the battle we would work towards. You would get 1 point over and done with, work towards the next, and then obviously the last phase of the battle, whether you would actually win or lose.
Okay. So did you actually do this on the battle sites themselves?
Not from what I can remember. We didn't do any on the actual battlefields. If we were called up to sort of, because the people that would organise these battles, they would usually be a local Rotary club or something. They would get us in to do a battle, and we would usually pick an event nearby, something that happened sort of nearby to where the actual battle took place, or if not, we would actually make a scenario up.
Like bar fight at the local pub.
Yeah, that's right.
That was in the evenings, I think.
Because the thing with the English Civil War, I mean, it encompassed the whole country. So wherever you were, whatever part of the country you found yourself in, you would know a bit of Civil War history and connected to the wider area. So there's plenty to draw upon.
So when we're talking about civil wars in general,
yeah,
what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, like, for the English Civil War, it was like parliamentarians against the royalists, right?
Yes. Civil wars are actually quite complex things usually, and we are going to delve into, this sort of looking through the research. It's between the English Civil War, American Civil War, and a few other sort of conflicts. And civil wars are usually quite complex affairs, and as opposed to normal sort of wars when you get one country versus another, I mean, civil wars can be quite sort of brutal as well, because you have people wanting to settle scores, and they can be sort of, they can tear families apart. It was not that uncommon to have sort of noble families where your brother would be on one side and you would be on the other. It came down to that. And the English Civil Wars, they were loosely based around sort of Parliament wanting more control over the country than the king, because before the English Civil War, the king would have ruled the country. I mean, it's different now. We have like a puppet monarchy now, where the Queen is just head of state, and she doesn't theoretically she does wield a lot of power, but she doesn't she keeps her thoughts to herself because of the English Civil Wars. We actually sort of fought to sort of get the parliamentary democracy system we have today.
So would it be a fair assessment to say that civil wars are more internal?
Yes.
Whereas world wars or country wars are more political.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it's very defined. I mean, if you sort of go up against another country, I mean, you look at let's take both world wars. They're very defined. They're very easy to nail down. Your country's the good guy, and the country you're fighting against are the bad guys. But civil wars are so much more complicated.
Like I say, it's a bit like what's going on at the moment, isn't it, with Ukraine and Russia?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could sort of call that a civil war in a sort of roundabout way, because Ukraine was part of Russia for a very long time. And this is still like the hangover from that time when the Ukraine split from Russia. Russia didn't really want it, but now it's all come to a head again. It's all boiled back. So these resentments, these sort of, a civil war doesn't usually just snap and happen overnight. It can simmer for years under the surface, and then it all sort of comes to a head. And when you talk about the English Civil War, there was actually 3 of them, all in relative succession. So there you go.
What about the American Civil War? What was that really about? I mean, was that to do with Indians against the interlopers, as it were? Or?
No, it's political. It was for state rights. I mean, basically, I hope our American listeners will forgive me for my very basic sort of synopsis of the American Civil War. And it was to do with state rights, because in America it's a bit different to what it is here. I mean, states have more control over what happens within them with laws and stuff like that. But during the American Civil War, it was the South felt threatened by the North. The North was very industrialized, and it didn't have slavery in the North, whereas the South was more rural and it did depend on slavery. And it was those sort of it was sort of that and many other things, but it was sort of that sort of caused a lot of the southern states to actually secede from the Union. So they split away and formed their own country, in effect, the Confederate States of America. But the Union did not want this, so it ended up in wars, with the North wanting to reunify the country, but the South wanting to be separate from the North.
Okay. So when we talk in regards to the paranormal, because we are a paranormal radio show, bringing it back to what we do, and we've talked about paranormal stories regarding the world wars. We did World War I, we've done World War II, haven't we? Do you think, or do you feel that there are more paranormal encounters and stories to do with civil wars than there was to do with the world wars? That's an interesting question, isn't it?
It is an interesting question.
See where my brain's going with this, boys, can't you?
It appears to be, you know, you look at sort of like World War One. You know, I was sort of like looking through, and it's very scant. You know, considering the scale of the war itself, you know, and the amount of people that died and everything. I mean, to actually get a sort of like a paranormal story from World War One is actually quite difficult. I mean, you've got sort of some of the sort of like the famous ones are like the Bowman of Mons, which has more or less been proven to be a hoax or a fake. You know, it was a bit of propaganda. And this is something else you have to sort of like look out for. I mean, particularly during civil wars and stuff, there's a lot of propaganda flies backwards and forwards, and a lot of these ghost stories, they do sort of tend to come out of the propaganda sort of side of things. I mean, sort of propagandists would use a ghost story to hammer home a point and overlay it on an actual event, which is true of the first one we're actually going to look at.
Well, it's not just that, is it? It's because, like, we see it in religion. To get a moral over or a point over, they build a story about it, right?
Yeah, and sort of back in the day, I mean, you know, it was very common. It was very common, you know. So even these written accounts you do get, you know, you do have to take it with a pinch of salt. But there you go.
So
they're good stories.
Yeah, we love a good story. So in your travels, both of you, this is too really. Have you actually visited any of the battle sites?
I have. Richard, did we go down to the Battle of Hastings? Did we do that trip?
No, we haven't been down there.
I've been to Hastings. I'd say I've been to Hastings quite a lot. Not actually visited the battlefield there. The battlefield that I have visited was Bosworth.
Yes, we done Bosworth.
We done the Bosworth field.
We've done that twice, haven't we?
We have, yeah. I've been on there a couple more times since, but yeah. Bosworth field. That's where Richard the third died.
Yes, it was the end of the Plantagenet house, and that's when the Tudors came in and took over.
Yeah, that's right.
Henry V.
Edmund
Blackadder cut his head off.
So when you go to the battle site, it's not as easy as it's just a field. We're talking quite a widespread area, aren't we?
Oh, they are big. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's sort of like some of these medieval battles were big. I mean, I'm not too sure about Bosworth Field, but it does sort of spread quite an expanse. Bosworth, you can spend a good day like walking around it if you take sort of like a map with you and. Which sort of points out where various actions took place and where the armies sort of marched up to confront one another. So yeah, they do take over.
You could have a walk around the battlefield, but I think I'd much prefer to stay in the visitor centre and look at the map.
Easier, isn't it?
It's a lot easier. But no, on a serious note, yeah, as you said, Richard, it is a big expanse of field that
and there's very few battlefields like what we were just talking about. It's just gone from your head. Bosworth, yeah, because Bosworth is marked out. They've got sort of flagpoles dotted about with the, you know, sort of and Culloden Moor.
Yeah,
those are the only two battlefields in the UK that are actually designated sort of battlefields, and they do work with preservation to actually keep them as they were.
What about the rest of the? What about Naseby? Is that
no, again, Naseby, they've just got a plaque in the middle of the field.
I've not been there. I just know a few.
Yeah, and some of the other battlefields, and some have been lost under sort of development and things like that. So
yeah, I should imagine the one in Hastings. There's obviously a town called Battle down there.
Yeah,
and they at one point they thought that's where the battle was, hence the name. But it turns out that it wasn't actually at that site, and it could actually be where the abbey is.
Yeah, again, because they're sort of like, especially if you go back to Hastings and even sort of battles like Bosworth and Naseby. I mean, there is a sort of school of thought that they did actually happen in different places.
Yeah,
than what is being designated to them today. So
I know. There was a TV show in the UK called Time Team. They actually excavated archaeologically a field opposite the abbey, and they found loads of artifacts. So they said like either that was the battlefield, or that's where the encampment was.
Yeah.
So no one's really going to know.
No, you're not going to know the exact spot. You just know the general sort of like locale.
Not until we invent a time machine.
Well, that was actually going to be one of my questions, was how much archaeological artifacts still turn up. You know what I mean? So like in the World War fields, like we know that they mow the field, plough the field even.
Yeah.
And things still turn up. Whereas is that the case for some of these big battles? There's a lot of like metal work under there still, isn't there?
Well, yes, you can still pull up sort of artifacts. They're not so numerous like you get from World War One. Of course, I mean,
no, because they're obviously a lot further back in history.
Obviously, but you could sort of, where they do find out a lot is when they come across the burial pits to the battles and stuff, because the fallen wouldn't have been taken away too far from the actual battlefields. They would have just dug sort of big ditches and just sort of thrown the dead into it. So I know round Bosworth, I think Bosworth, that they are pretty sure where it actually happened, because a few years ago they did actually find one of these pits with about 50 skeletons in them.
So in regards to the time period we're talking, how many kind of men are involved in one side, just one side? Are we talking like a couple of hundred, or are we talking thousands and thousands?
I was watching something about Bosworth Field earlier today. Richard of York at Bosworth, his side was about 15,000, I believe, men, and Henry V had about 25,000. So he was quite outnumbered, but he done well in the fight, even though he lost. But the biggest battle to actually take part in the UK was a battle from the Wars of the Roses, which is in the same timeline as Bosworth Field, and that was sort of that was a huge affair. You're talking about 30,000 a side.
So you're going back to where you said, some of the dead weren't buried too far away from the battlefield.
Yeah.
When they discovered Richard III's body in Leicester, that's only an hour away from the battlefield.
Yeah, well, his body was actually taken to Leicester and put on display after the battle, and then he was buried in the cemetery, which, as we now know, was demolished and became a car park.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I thought it was quite ironic that they found the body of Richard III underneath one of the spaces, and it was actually marked with a big R.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite clever.
So when we talk about, I mean, that's a lot of people in just one side of the army, 15,000 men, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of people, yeah.
So we're not just talking soldiers, we're talking horses. We're talking
horses, camp followers, yeah.
I mean, it was
15... it was like a city on the move, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a little township on the move, and if you were and it would have been the last thing you wanted for an army to turn up in your village or stuff, because they'd wreck the economy of the village. They'd just come through and take everything they needed. So you'd be left, crops. They would take all the livestock. A lot of armies would just live off the land, and and
imagine that, folks. 15,000 men living off the land, passing through villages and towns. You can imagine it's disruptive. It's horrible.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I think, even the Grand Old Duke of York would struggle having that many men.
And also you'd have camp followers. So it was quite known that behind the army, you would have wives and children and, well, I say wives, prostitutes, to fulfill that need.
And wives, as you say, the sort of families. I mean, not everyone would have taken their wives, but certain wives would have come along and they would have tended to the wounded. They would have tended to a group of men, sort of making sure, doing their washing and stuff like that. So, yeah.
This is a big undertaking when you look at this scenario, isn't it? When you think about it, you've got to look at it as I say, you've got to look at the whole spectrum. Now, this is an en masse movement of people. There's a lot of emotion, fear, right? So before the battle, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a scary time.
Mm-hmm.
For even the most hardened warrior, I would imagine. You're facing your death at the end of the day, and God willing that you survive it.
Yeah.
Right? Or you could end up being mortally injured or maimed for life.
Yeah.
Not being able to work.
I think that was possibly would have been an overriding fear, not actually getting killed. I mean, you would hope that if something did happen, it would kill you outright, because worse things happened after the battle if you were wounded.
So, like the battle, though, that's like the climatic point of what you're doing for whatever cause it is that you're doing it for, or because you're being paid, or whether or not, loyalty to your lord or master or whatever, or king or parliament cause or whatever it be. The emotional impact of that is quite profound, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's sort of certainly one of these sort of points that actually sort of which makes you think that of all the places on Earth that should be haunted, battlefields should.
Yeah.
So.
But we then have to look at the mechanism as to why there are hauntings of that particular period in time. Because let's be fair, if I was like in a battle, the last place I'd want to haunt would be where I died. It would probably be going to visit my family or somewhere where I was at peace, rather than in the middle of a field. However, having said that, there are many, many encounters of spectral happenings on these battlefields. We're going to take a look at a few of them across the globe. So, as Richard said, please forgive us from the American side. We're not as good on the American side as we are on the English, but we'll have a go because we need to. I think it's important to mark these. People lived and died and for many, many different reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, absolutely. And then even as we talk about different types of hauntings as well in another show, we did actually discuss traumatic occurrences. So, like, I don't know, car accidents and things like that. And then the spook or spectre appears to go and see his loved ones and things like that. So I would assume, like in the case of battlefields, that too would have occurred.
Possibly. I mean, you can't discount that.
Yeah, the crisis apparition are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was, there's a few famous stories of crisis and apparitions occurring during World War One. So
Yeah. I mean, having said that, we're going back further in time.
Yeah.
Really, with some of these battles that we're talking about. Let's talk about the Battle of Edge Hill. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Sorry. Thought you both dropped off there.
No. We're still here.
Skype crashed. Right. So the Battle of Edgehill was actually the first major conflict of the English Civil War, and it took place in Warwickshire. Now, Richard, talk us through this Battle of Edgehill.
Oh dear. Yeah. As I said, the armies were actually circling each other. You know, as said there, it was the first major battle of the Civil War, and it was thought it would be the only battle. You know, they thought this conflict between Parliament and the King would be sort of like sorted out in one battle. And the King was the favourite to actually sort of win it. And, you know, they finally clashed at Edgehill. The armies, and as I said, virtually just stumbled into one another. And it lasted for, it lasted for a day, you know, because it wasn't a short battle. It wasn't short, sharp and quick. It lasted about a day. And it was indecisive. I mean, both sides sort of claimed a loose victory, but no one side actually claimed overall victory. So it was left sort of, you know, hanging in the air.
So do you think that this particular battle was like a confused melee rather than an organised, strategical, tactical
Possibly,
battle?
yes, because you know, there hadn't been much strife in Britain for about 50 years before, and the last major event to sort of happen would have been the threat of the Spanish Armada. So, you know, and you're talking sort of 80 years earlier. So England had been at sort of peace. So yes, I mean, you would have got the armies would have drawn up, but you know, they would have been very green.
Right. Now, this happened on the 23rd of October in 1642, to give you an idea of time span that we're on. Now, after this particular battle, basically, it was like when they split, they kind of just left all the dead, all the dying, all the maimed. They just kind of like left them, didn't they? They just like left and just kept going.
Yeah, well, the parliamentarians drew off and they went their way, which did leave the road to London open, and the King could have sort of like gone straight down to London, which he did attempt to do, but there was, you know, it just wasn't very well thought out, you know. He just, you know, there's sort of like too many chiefs and not enough Indians, I think.
Yeah, but it didn't. Although that particular battle was over in the physical, there were strange occurrences that started to happen not long after, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was around Christmas time, wasn't it, when
Yeah.
these stories first started to come out? Was that in the same year that the battle had occurred?
Yeah, it was in the same year. Yeah.
Okay, so when so the battle happened in the October, is that right?
Yeah.
The battle happens in the October, and then by Christmas, so the armies have moved off. The battlefield is kind of cleared. The dead and the dying have sort of been left, and the dead have been chucked into pits, and so it's kind of been a cleared battle site, right?
Yes, yeah, they would have got it. You know, the local village would have got it back to normal, sort of thing. You know, whether grey sheep on it or whatever they did with it. Yeah.
By the Christmas, so you're looking at what, about 6 to 8 weeks later.
Yeah.
You then start to hear tales coming from that particular area, the battlefield itself.
Yeah.
Now, it first came out by some shepherds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Obviously tending their sheep at night and all the rest of it. They first of all, they heard the sound of drums going, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they heard groaning of injured and dying men.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this noise starts to get closer to them. It's starting to approach them. It's getting closer and closer. Now, they are frightened out of their wits to the point they can't run away. They're like literally frozen to the spot, right?
Yeah.
And then they have a vision. Well, I say they have a vision appeared before them in the sky.
Yeah, this is more of sort of like a spectral event in the sky. You know, it's not taking part in the fields around them. This is sort of one peculiar thing about this. You know, it sort of happens in the sky above.
Now, this is quite interesting because when we talked, we know that the Battle of the Mons story was propaganda and all of that. But there are other stories you hear, not so much of battles, but things appearing in the sky.
Yeah, that's
I've
right.
seen cities in the sky. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful things showing up in the sky above, rather than you would imagine if it was like a haunting, it would be taking place around them.
Yeah.
But this is almost like a reenactment going on
in the heavens.
Above them. They're watching it like you would a cinema.
I think this is down to aliens. What they've done, what they've done, they obviously knew of the battle, and they made it as a movie. And they were just hovering over one day, and they thought, "Oh no, we'll put that on." So they're a big projected into the sky. So they were literally just peering out their window of their UFO craft, feet up on the dashboard, you know, drinking a cup of tea, watching that movie. Bit of popcorn.
Kind of like a drive-through in the sky.
Absolutely. Yeah, why not?
Okay. That's one theory. Well done.
So that's
bringing
debunked
that
it.
To the table.
That's debunked that one.
But the thing is, they're watching this battle. The two armies coming together, the clattering of arms. They're hearing the sounds as well as seeing the sights going on in the sky above them. The horses, their cries of men. You've got the confusion of battle. You've got the swords striking each other. You've got all of this going on.
You've got it all going on, yeah.
In front of these shepherds, and they're terrified, absolutely terrified, which you would be, to be fair. You wouldn't. It wouldn't. I can imagine you sitting there watching it, so and you wouldn't even be able to utter, "Can you see that?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would just be absolutely transfixedly terrified in the spot to what you're seeing. And now, how long did this vision go on for? Or did it apparently go on for? Allegedly go on for? We'll go with.
Well, you know, it wasn't a fleeting glimpse. I mean, it says here that it lasted up to 3 hours.
See?
That's a long time, folks.
Yeah,
it is. It's a movie.
It is. It's like Ben-Hur, isn't it? You know, that's a long movie.
So when it was over, the shepherds, well, bless them, they released from this transfixion point, and at that point, real fear and your flight or fight takes place, and they go running off. And they ran to a place called Kyneton, or Kyneton, right? It's a village. And they woke up the Justice of the Peace and Mr. Wood and his neighbour, who was the Marshal, and the Minister, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, it was Mr. Marshall. He was the Minister.
Yeah, the Minister. Yeah, well, yeah, I see why I got confused there.
A little bit of confusion there for me. So they said, right, okay, we'll go and have a look. So the following night, they then took a crowd of them. It's like, you coming with me? Oh, I don't want to watch this one. I'm just being.
So they all turned up to have a gander, didn't they?
Yeah, they all turned up on the battlefield to see what was occurring, as you do. You know, a bit of excitement in the village. Let's go watch the battle ahead. And literally within half an hour of their arrival, and again, this is over Christmas period. This is Christmas night. This happened again.
Yeah.
So they say.
See, it's got to be a movie. It's got to be the aliens.
Well, if they've got children with them, it wouldn't surprise me because kids love watching the same movie over and over again, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So again, it unfolds before them, the fighting, you know, the sounds, all the rest of it. Yep. And this went on for weeks. Many sightings of this. This isn't just like, you know, a one-off occurrence. This is like happening night after night. Many people allegedly witnessed this, to the point that the news of this miracle, we're going to have to call it because it kind of is, right?
Yeah.
Reached King Charles. He was actually in Oxford at the time.
Yeah.
How far? Now I know the answer to this question. How far is Warwickshire to Oxford? I don't know this question. I was just saying that. I'm awful. Could have been 5 minutes down the road.
I think it's about hour and 40 minutes or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
by car, that is. Yeah.
That's in a car. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's quite a way.
Yeah.
Going to the 16th century or 17th century.
Yeah, you know, you can see, sort of it would take time for news to filter down. But allegedly, yeah, King Charles did actually get to hear about it because Oxford was the capital for the Royalists during the Civil War. The Parliamentarians had London and the Royalists had Oxford.
Mm-hmm. So he sent out a commission of 6 officers to go and report basically what's going on. Why are they all saying that there's things happening in the sky at Culloden? Do you know what I mean? What's going on? Right. So 6 of his officers, off they went. Right. So the other thing is,
I'd say these officers were ones that had fought in that battle, weren't they?
Yeah. But the other side of this is unsettling news for people. Right, this battle is being played over and over again. It's being witnessed. It's being talked about. It's like a scary thing. It's unsettling. They've got enough going on as it is with the Civil War, let alone tales of apparitions in the sky. So he wants to kind of like calm everybody down. So he sends his officers out to basically, you know, go, don't be so stupid, calm down. There's nothing there. You're all getting hysterical. Stop it, kind of scenario. So the officers get to where the battle was fought, and they confirmed the apparitions. They said, "Oh my God," to the point they could identify some of the soldiers.
Yeah.
Right. So they say. Apparently, they saw a guy called Sir Edmund Verney. Now he was the king's standard bearer, so he's well known in the close circle of the king, right? And he used to carry the standard. Now the standard was basically a tapestry on a pole.
Yeah, a flag. Yeah, big flag.
Yeah, which donates it on the battlefield where the king is.
Yeah, it would donate. Yeah, sort of like the king will have his own standard, and each regiment will have its own standard as well for identification purposes, really.
Yeah, bearing in mind you're in a really confusing state, you've got to kind of know where everybody is, so you can direct the battle. Now, the parliamentarians had actually caught him effectively and cut off his hands so they could steal the royal standard. Now, this is quite a thing, isn't it, Richard?
Well, yes and no. I mean,
point of pride, I would say.
Yes, I mean, there were atrocities committed. I mean, they were more, you know, there was still a gentlemanly act. I mean, but I think the story goes he wouldn't give up the standard because you don't. I mean, there's of all the things you lose during a battle, you don't lose your standard, because if you do, it's the ultimate disgrace. So I can actually see, you know, him refusing to give way, and then perhaps hacking off his hands to get the standard off him.
Just out of curiosity, is the standard you're talking about the same royal standard that we have today?
Similar, not exact, I don't think.
Okay.
Now, don't you remember when we did the heraldry show? Each king changes it slightly, doesn't he, to fit him?
Yeah, I didn't know whether or not, because we're talking about the monarchy as opposed to the actual person, whether or not the monarchy would have their own standard that gets passed on with the crown.
It does. The basis of it does, but there are like we discussed.
If you're charged with, and if you are ensign to the king, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you there.
So anyway, the parliamentarians had captured the standard and chopped his hands off, and allegedly, in this vision above in the sky, you could see one of Sir Edmund's hands, dismembered hands, still holding onto the royal standard. So the officers wrote their report. They named it a great wonder in heaven, and wrote basically everything that they'd witnessed.
Yeah.
Now, this is actually officially recognised by the British Public Record Office.
Yeah, that's what I found a bit odd about it. But yeah, I mean, this account is actually in there. So it leaves you to wonder, you know.
Did it happen?
Did it happen as it was said? Which I tend not to believe that. I think it's more, as I said earlier, a propaganda thing. You know, sort of like because the battle was not sort of decisive. You know, there's a few loose ends left, and perhaps the king wanted to sort of bolster himself and try and put it down to some sort of divine recognition that God was still on the king's side.
Even though what they're witnessing is the standard being taken by the parliamentarians.
Because if his standard was lost, that would have been a big thing. That would have been a big talking point. So I can see them perhaps at a later date creating this story to try and sort of cover it up.
So what ended up happening was, because of the way people are disposed of when they die in a battle, the local villagers wanted these visions to stop. So apparently they went around and dug up all of the people that had died, the bodies, and gave them a Christian burial. So hopefully that would stop them from fighting in the skies above them. It's like, I'm a little bit disconcerting every night, everybody. It's like getting a bit much now.
Yeah.
So let's just give them a proper burial. It's
like the version of Noisy Neighbours, isn't it?
Worse than that, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you're making far too much noise. Can't get the kids to sleep. We've got to do something about this.
That's it. It's like the parable of the guy that used to go around to battlefields and go, "Can you keep the noise down? I'm trying to sleep over here."
I would doubt very much if they dug up individual bodies. I would more likely probably say they went and did a proper prayer and blessing over the mass graves, because let's be fair, villages, who has the time for that? They've got to fight for survival on a daily basis to live, let alone keep digging up dead bodies for Christian burial. So to me, I would say probably they did a lot of blessing of the land and the graves that they knew than that. So basically, after that was it. But apparently, allegedly, if you're on that battlefield in the middle of the night around the time it was taking place, like in October, you can still hear cannon fire, battle cries.
That was between about 12 and 1, wasn't it? Night to 1 in the morning.
Yeah, I've actually been to Edgehill, and it is it is sort of just a sloping hill with the village of Kennington actually on the ridge above it. So yeah, it does sort of stir up a bit of a sort of spooky atmosphere at night, I should imagine.
Well, if you're on there on the anniversary, if you're in that area, then maybe check it out, because apparently every year you can garner some paranormal activity of your own.
Yep, and the aliens come back to play the movie, 3-hour epic. Just have your tickets ready.
Yeah, they don't like people just turning up without paying.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so what's the next one we're going to look at? Because I've not heard of this one. It's Chickamauga and the Chattanooga.
Yeah, Chattanooga. This is American Civil War this time. So
okay, right. So we're going over the pond.
Yeah, a different time frame as well. We've moved into the mid 1800s or 1863. In fact.
1863, yeah.
This is September of 1863. So talk me through this one.
To be quite honest, I don't know a lot about it myself, to be quite honest.
Right, okay. So, I'm assuming it takes place on a river, because they say that the name means river of death, but it doesn't, because the Cherokee and the Chickasaw language says it's more to do with the place where fish are speared. It's a bit different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that particular creek or river, we would call it in the UK, it's actually, they call it a creek in America, don't they?
Yeah, they tend to call sort of what we call rivers, they call creeks. Yeah.
There was a bit of a bit. There was a bit of a battle. There was a quite ferocious battle, we'll say, that was fought between September the 18th to 20th, and this is horrific when you look at the quantities, right?
Yeah.
It produced 35,000 casualties between two sides. That is more than 25% of the men that were there.
Yeah.
A quarter of the men that were fighting in this battle died or was casualties.
Yeah.
As we enter into the American Civil War, this is one striking thing you'll find is the casualty lists are astronomical.
That's because it's a bigger country and they've got more people.
Yeah, I know, but it's still horrific.
Oh, absolutely. Of course it is. Any battle or war like this is horrific.
This is what I find absolutely bonkers about this is the losages. Even now, I cannot understand how one man or leader of the country can do this. And it's not, he doesn't, is he seeing the people, the everyday person that's going out and fighting the battle? Yes, I know we have armies that are trained to do this, and that's ultimately that's the job they take on. But they're people. They have families. They have emotions. They have, the human facts that they're individual people with strands, that intertwine, and you know what I mean. And do people not? Anyway, I could go on a right little rant.
Yeah,
but I don't understand how a leader can go 35,000 men.
You're looking at it through modern eyes. I mean, those sorts of casualties would not be acceptable now in today's eyes, but back then they were. Sort of life was different.
Absolutely, and
it's not different. It's not different because we've got battles still going on around the globe now.
Yeah, but the risk was higher, but they would still, because they're very patriotic. They would do anything.
The American Civil War came at a sort of like a crossroads of military technology. The military technology with guns, muskets, and artillery pieces far outstripped the sort of like the drill and the tactics used against them. So this is possibly why the American Civil War had such a high casualty rate. They were still using Napoleonic infantry tactics against modern rifled weapons. If you know.
And there we go. There's the stupidity of man right there in that sentence. Right. Okay. I think women should be in charge of the world, but I don't think men do a particularly good job when it comes to fighting. Anyway, did I say that out loud? Whoopsie. So anyway, this was a southern attack.
Where's that mute button?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a southern attack. It was led by James Longstreet. And this is basically over half of the Union Army. He takes them, and the assault is brought to a halt by a Union stand led by a guy called George Thomas.
Yep.
Right, now his position was on Horseshoe Ridge. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
The Confederates made several assaults on that particular position. So it's obviously a very difficult position to break. So I would imagine it's high.
Yeah, I should imagine he's on higher ground, and it's always, they always say, and if you're going to have a battle, as long as you occupy the high ground, you're okay. It's a tactical advantage to have the high ground.
Exactly, and I would imagine from the name Horseshoe, it probably is sort of like a semicircle.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever way they come at you, you can cover it quite easily.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like a corral. You get them into a corral and you can just shoot them down.
Yeah, be like, yeah, as you say it, and if it is in a horseshoe shape, you're just funneling them in, and and you're surrounding them by about three sides.
Yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? You funnel them into the bowl, as it was, and then just attack from the above, and they don't stand a chance because they ain't got nowhere to run.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, not knowing the exact geological positioning, that's how it sounds to me. Now, the following day, the Union Army withdrew to Chattanooga, so it gave the South a bit of a new hope. It had a lot of defeats, a lot of big defeats, mainly at Vicksburg and obviously Gettysburg, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't long until the Union troops were again advancing. Now, the battle at Chickamauga, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but please forgive my pronunciation. That was not the only time that many deaths occurred on the grounds of what is now a national military park, is it?
No.
Because during the Spanish-American War, Camp Thomas was established on the battlefield as a training site for the troops destined for Cuba.
Right, okay.
Okay, so the camp was poorly sited, sanitary conditions were really bad. And see, this is the other thing. It's not just like your fellow man who might kill you. These aren't sanitary places, guys. So
No.
you've got disease rife in these places: dysentery, malaria, typhoid fever. All of these you've got to worry about as well, and that could wipe out half your troops without even hitting a battle.
Well, back in those days, yeah. I mean, you know, cholera was the right bane of the army's life, drinking infected water. I mean,
Yeah, and also you've got to remember the medical practices of the day. They weren't what they are today. You're not
No.
talking lovely sanitized bandages and, you know, world-class surgery and the thing. I mean, we do have that now, but you didn't have that. You had probably a red hot poker to cauterize a wound.
well, yeah,
Absolutely.
the main sort of surgical procedure would have been amputation. I can remember, and I've got a book, you know, sort of was about the American Civil War, and there's it's actually got a photograph outside a surgeon's window, and it's just full of arms and legs.
Yeah,
Jesus.
they would have. They would have lopped off the limb and then put the hot poker on to cauterize it.
Mm.
And most people obviously died of septicemia or shock.
Yeah.
And you didn't have like
So,
anaesthetic.
Well, they did. The Union were better equipped, sort of medically, than the Confederates. So they did have antiseptics and stuff like that, but they would get very quickly overwhelmed during the battle. Once the wounded started coming in, you know, your limited stocks would have, you know, soon diminished.
Basically, just to do with the camp conditions itself, 700 deaths occurred in one summer, and
and
that
that's
wasn't
just
to
a
do.
medical.
That wasn't. Yeah, that was just to do medical stuff. That was nothing to do with battles or battle wounds.
No.
That was through just, what I've said: dysentery, malaria, typhoid fever, those kind of things.
Right.
So you're losing men for that reason. That's before you've even hit a battlefield. So this
Yeah.
area is horrific in
Yeah.
lots of different ways. You're not just looking at the battles itself, and the whole area. As I say, the actual Battle of Chickamauga, that's not the only time that particular piece of land or that area has had huge death.
No, it happened
You also had
later
it through this. Yeah.
when they built the training camp there later in the 1800s for the Spanish American War. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, you've got to look at the area and you've got to look at the horrific events that happened. And you go, right, okay, so is there any paranormal activity linked to that? Apparently there is.
Yeah.
And again, we have reports of hearing men moan in pain. And trust me, when a man's in pain, you know his pain. You know. It's not just like oh, you know what I mean? It's like a full it's
It all
you
depends
know
how
the
badly
sound.
you're injured. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it can sort of spread from the low moaning and groaning up to people actually writhing in agony.
Mm-hmm. You can
Just for
hear horses
Splinter.
galloping.
Yeah.
But
I said just for Splinter, they'd be moaning.
Well, there is that these days, but they're a softer breed, aren't they? I do love men. I'm sounding very anti-man in this show, but I'm not. I'm really not. Anyway, you can hear horses galloping where there are no horses.
Right.
Undergrowth allegedly moves as if somebody's pushed it to one side, not just like in the breeze. Like
not just in the wind.
No, someone's actually pushed it to one side. There's again a difference, right?
Yeah.
And actually, a white lady is seen many times. That's been reported wandering that area, which is like the battlefield and the camp area.
Right.
So she looks as if she's looking for somebody.
Like I say, would that be maybe either someone that like nurse
or one of the camp followers, or
not necessarily.
One of the soldiers' wives.
Or think about it, right? How many reports do we hear of a lady in white that's actually in the UK? When we hear of a lady in white reporting, we don't think camp follower or wife or something like that. We've got more of a mythological, and she's usually linked to bodies of water.
Yeah, true.
So it could be that, we don't know. That's all that's said about that one. What's really weird, super weird about this one, is there has also been, a report of a humanoid figure with shining green eyes.
Right, okay. It's a sort of like a shadow person or something like that. It sounds, doesn't it?
Maybe maybe he's just a jealous ghost.
Yeah, green with envy. Yeah, I can see that.
Well, they call him Old Green Eyes, and they reckon that particular thing, I don't even know what you would call that, was there long before the battle.
Oh, right. So it did have a history of having a spectre. I suppose a spectre is what you can class that as. It doesn't sound like your classic ghost, does it?
Mind you, it could be something like the Bigfoot. Well,
I was
thinking red eyes.
I was thinking more about that. Reminded me more of what they were seeing at Point Pleasant.
Yeah.
It's the alien looking for movie ideas.
Well, in 1981, a park ranger named Edward Tinney from the Chattanooga portion of the military park said in an interview that he'd seen Old Green Eyes and it had disappeared before his very eyes, quoting, "It's enough to make the hair stand up on the back of your neck." He reckons he's not superstitious, and he says that on the night he saw him, the night was a foggy one, and the approach of a car was what caused Old Green Eyes to disappear.
Oh, right.
I'm thinking it's actually more to do with the headlights of the car reflecting off of the fog, personally.
Yeah, this was in 1981, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's personally what I would go. But there are many, many other stories about the eerie sounds and the ghosts in the park linked to that particular battle, the camp, and Old Green Eyes himself.
Yeah.
So that area has got like a history of paranormal encounters. It's easy to sit here. I would say this. It's really easy for us to sit here and go, yeah, well, that's just like lights reflecting off the fog, right? On that one account.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to do that. And how many times have we said, you listen to the story, and then, all right, so you then would, go and you would go and interview the witness, and you'd go to the area, you'd look at the area and do that to investigate it properly. And that you shouldn't dismiss people's, stories and their perspectives and their understanding of what they believed happened.
Yeah.
How many times have we said that? And yet here we are sitting there going, easily dismissed.
Yeah.
Naughty us.
Yeah, we shouldn't be so dismissive. I mean, the people
we should not be so dismissive.
Coming forward with these stories, and who are we to sort of say, nah?
No, that's
exactly.
That obviously something happened, and they're reporting it.
Exactly. And, one of the fears of people reporting it is they didn't want to report it because of fears of being ridiculed, right?
Really, yeah, absolutely.
So we are naughty.
But I must admit, people in the US do like coloured eyes, don't they? Because you've got Bigfoot with the red eyes, you've got old green eyes there, you've got old blue eyes. He's Frank Sinatra in it, I think.
Yeah, but he had beautiful blue eyes, that man.
Yeah, see, it's all about the eyes, isn't it?
There's a lot to be said about the eyes.
I mean,
Windows to the soul and all
what
that.
eyes did the Mothman have? Was he red eyes as well?
If I remember rightly, I think it was red glowing eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
if I remember
about
rightly.
The eyes.
He was also quite mechanical. There was something like mechanical about him, from what I remember anyway. Anyway, we've actually come to the end of the first half of the show.
Really?
That was quick.
Really? We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to have a look at some more scary tales of haunted battlefields. Join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
Welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. See, Paul, I remembered. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course you did.
I'm a good girl. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, before the break, we were discussing all about battlefields and more Civil War battlefields than World War battlefields, really, weren't we, guys?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So let's move on, shall we, and talk about the next one. This is more local. This is back to home turf, as it were. Culloden Moor in Inverness in Scotland.
Yeah, Culloden.
Culloden. Yeah.
Culloden.
Yeah.
Culloden.
Culloden. It's
Culloden.
Yeah.
All right, Culloden.
I can see why you say it's Culloden. Yeah, no, it's like
And this was actually the last battle fought on British soil. It took place in Culloden. Culloden, when the redcoats of the British Army destroyed the troops of the Jacobean rebellion under Charles Stuart. Now, Charles Stuart is known as Bonnie Prince Charles. The battle didn't take very long. It only took less than an hour. Cool, right? But the Jacobean army was actually cut to pieces by artillery bombardment.
Oh yeah, artillery bombardment, and those that survived that, they went into what's called the famous Highland Charge, which was their preferred method of attack, and they all fell to the bayonets of the British troops, because before the battle, the British actually trained their troops because they knew they would be charged by the Jacobites. So they trained their troops not to stab the person in front of them, but to stab the person on the left of them. Which must have, it sort of really did. Because usually it was very difficult to withstand a Highland Charge, but the British actually sort of devised this way of actually trying to halt it, and it did very successfully.
Poor Jacobite army is all I'm going to say. Yeah. I mean, they were massacred, effectively. I mean, the few survivors that withdrew from the field, the British actually followed them. This is not a great shining example of the British, I have to say, against Scotland. They followed them and killed anybody that they could find. So we literally was looking to wipe them out.
Yeah, because this happened in the mid-1700s. 1746 was the Battle of Culloden. But there had been Jacobite risings in the sort of like the first half of the 1700s. There'd been about three. Scotland was always a problem because it was always sort of courting, sort of like the Catholic idea, and the Jacobites were were supporters of the Old Pretender, he was known as, which was he was originally James II of Scotland, but he was overthrown because he had Catholic sympathies and replaced by his brother-in-law and sister and sister William and Mary. So this was always an underlying problem. But when Prince Charlie came over, the British decided to actually call a halt to it all and draw a line under it. Excuse me. And they actually totally took apart the Jacobites.
Well, after that particular battle, he managed to escape the slaughter. He basically was on the run for 5 months. He eluded the government, and the leaders of the Jacobean rebellion were rounded up, jailed, ready to be taken to trial for treason. Charles went to France. He remained in exile, never returned to Scotland. Basically, everybody that was caught and tried was sentenced to death. They could commute, actually, if they wanted to, deport, should I say, to the English colonies.
Yeah, which was like Jamaica and the east coast of America, Virginia, and places like that.
What's interesting about that is the descendants of those people fought the British again. This is an underlying hatred for the British, I have to say. And to be fair, they're still fighting, aren't they, for their independence over in Scotland, really. Although we're doing it on a political forum these days, not wars. There is still that fight for independence. But there's underneath it still bubbles away. The descendants actually fought against the British in the American Revolutionary War.
Yeah, and there would have been a fair few of them about,
Because if you're going to be deported over to America, and you get the chance to have another pop at the British, you're going to all right.
Yeah,
you know. So anyway, the Battle of Culloden Moor happens on April the 16th in 1746. But on the anniversary each year, so if you go to that particular battlefield on the anniversary, the moor is said to be haunted by spirits of the men who died there. And again, we have steel clashing against steel. We have cries of pain and moanings, lots of moanings, and lots of sounds of men running away, basically.
Yeah.
And all of that is supposed to have been heard on the moor.
Yeah.
Now,
you go there today, I mean, and there's loads of grave sites, there's loads of cairns, they're called, like piles of stones you can see where a lot of the Jacobites were actually buried after the engagement.
Well, they were buried as they lay, where they fell, basically. So you see these mounds on the moor, and that's where they're allegedly rested. Now, there is an apparition of a tall man in Highlander garb. I'm seeing Braveheart. I'm seeing Mel Gibson, and that kind of garb. Look, if I saw that, I probably would think that it's to do with a film rather than a ghost. But I suppose that's what Hollywood does to your brain. But a Highlander garb has been reported roaming around the burial mounds.
All right, yeah.
Now, locals claim, this isn't the only place I've heard this, actually, that birds in the area of the battlefield don't sing.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, sort of some World War I battlefields still reportedly have that as well.
Auschwitz allegedly has that too. Although I have had people say that when they went there, they heard birds. So that could just be a myth.
Yeah.
On that one. And others have reported spectral images moving around the grave mound. So not quite as defined as the Highlander garb guy, but spectral images. So like shadows moving amongst the grave mounds. And they've, again, marching to the battlefield. They've heard that. Lots and lots of things. In fact, this is actually one battlefield that people have actually gone and done investigations at.
Yeah. I can remember years ago I spoke to a person who wrote a book about walking the battlefields of England, and the only place he actually had an experience was on Culloden Moor. I sort of asked him, did he sort of, have any sort of tales to tell? And he said the only place was Culloden Moor. He spent a very uncomfortable night camping on there. He didn't go into much detail. I don't know quite what he sort of happened, but yeah.
You know what, though? I can't remember who I was talking to, but I've heard somebody talk about Culloden Moor as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to have a look, and they actually came across a guy in Highlander garb, and he said he was as real as he was, like me, as real as me.
Yeah.
And he thought it was actually a guy, like a tour guide who was dressed up to play the part, kind of thing. And when he approached him, he disappeared.
Oh, right.
I can't remember who I was talking to, but I remember the tale because I was thinking, oh, that would have been weird.
Let's go on a road trip, Richard.
Yeah, all the way up to Inverness.
But there is a cottage industry up there. There are loads of businesses up there who actually make their money. The Scottish are very good at this, I would say, business opportunity, because you see this around Loch Ness as well, this isn't far from Loch Ness, is it?
No, it's at the sort of like the mouth of Loch Ness, really. Well, and Inverness is, and it's not far outside of Inverness. Culloden.
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes by bus Inverness to where Loch Ness is.
Yeah.
And they're very good at having a little cottage industry. So if you go there, you can get lots of tours of the haunted areas of Inverness.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't just mean the battlefield itself, but there's lots of houses and structures where they say that the Jacobites hid, that haunted because of that event.
Yeah.
And, so there's quite a little cottage industry up there. In the same way as there's quite a little cottage industry regarding Loch Ness. Nessie. You can go there, you can go and buy a toy Loch Ness and, get tours of the loch and boat trips to go out to see Nessie. Not that you would, but you might. Do you know what I mean? Out on the loch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one that should be on the list if you're doing battlefields or want anniversary hauntings. When we were talking to Ruth Roper Wild, do you remember she compiled a book to do with anniversary hauntings?
Yeah.
And basically you could plan your year on anniversary hauntings and just go to these places and see if you caught anything.
Yeah.
Culloden Moor is probably one of the ones you should have on your list.
I would have thought so.
I would have thought so too. Right, so let's go back over the pond. Now, this is, Custer's Last Stand. Now, this is one where it's now ingrained in our psyche, isn't it, Custer's
Well, yeah, even, even this side of the pond, we've all heard of General Custer and his last stand, yeah.
And it's a bit like if you are having a metaphorical battle with anybody, you'd say, oh, it's their last stand. It was Custer's last stand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because this is quite a thing, really. I mean, obviously, we've watched films where it's been depicted, and, I can imagine that they're not accurate because they never are.
No.
And they probably paint him to be probably squeaky clean and in the right and a thoroughly upstanding gentleman. Haven't seen any of them myself, clearly. But yeah, I mean, okay, so talk me through this one. What is this battle that we're going to be talking about? Who was Custer?
This is General Custer. He was a veteran of the American Civil War, because this actually comes after the American Civil War, I believe in the 1870s, when the United States was still expanding, and it was rounding up all the Native Americans, sort of rounding them up and putting them into reservations and stuff like that. So it's quite sort of like a dark period in US history.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about cowboys and Indians kind of time?
Yes, you could call it that, I
Yeah, I
suppose.
think
Yeah.
so.
I'm seeing Calamity Jane in my head is this kind of period. And I'm sorry, folks. I do apologise for the Americans listening to the show. But that's kind of the time period I'm looking at here.
Yeah, probably, I think it is. Yeah, well, it's post Civil War anyway.
It's around that period, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay, so Custer was a general, was he?
Yes, General Custer.
And how many people would he have had under him, Mr. General? Was he like in charge of the battle? What was he?
Yeah, he had a detachment of cavalry officers. Yeah, yeah, they were just riding out, sort of scouting for Indians, basically.
Okay.
I think.
Right, okay. So he had quite a few troops. Now, none of the troops under Custer's direct command survived this particular fight.
Right.
5 companies rode with him in this attack, and he ended up having to make a withdrawal.
Yep.
Now, this is against Northern Cheyennes, the Arapaho,
Mm-hmm.
the Lakota. Now, these are warriors. These are Indian warriors. They're on.
Yeah, they're tribes. Yeah.
We have the problem we have is we have Native Americans who were given guns by the Americans, fighting against, and also using like bows and arrows on horseback.
Yeah.
To the, if I say Confederates, that's a different battle, isn't it?
No, it's a different war. Yeah.
Yeah. To General Custer's, who's got guns, a lot more guns. Right. So
that's right. Yeah.
You know, so you're going on this. Now the story goes, or Crow oral history, this is Native American native history, claims that Custer was wounded in that battle.
Mm-hmm.
And they withdrew to what's now known as Last Stand Hill.
Yeah.
Am I right? Am I right so far?
Yeah.
Yes. Ish. Yeah.
And that's where it all took place. Now, when his body was discovered, they did find wounds in his arm, chest, and temple. So it was either that killed him, or they talk about suicide.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was just saying that. Yeah.
Now, I don't think a man like General Custer would have committed suicide.
No.
I really don't. I just can't see it happening. He's more likely to have got wounded in battle and died from his wounds. But unfortunately, again, brutal times, people, brutal times, and nobody's innocent in war. Don't care who you are, what you say, whatever side it is, each side would have committed atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
And the Indians were quite brutal. So were the Americans or British or whoever you want to, whatever war you're looking at. They would not have wanted to have been captured. They would rather have committed suicide than have been captured.
Mm-hmm.
Die under my own premise rather than be killed. There's a pride there, isn't there? There's a master of your own destiny kind of scenario.
Well, yeah, you can see it, but I very much doubt Custer would have taken his own life. You know, he's a military man. You know,
that's it.
Go down fighting.
Yeah. Now, it was known that after a fight, anybody that was caught or captured would be chopped to pieces, right, by the Native Americans. Well, that's the propaganda anyway, that's what would have happened. So a lot of them decided to do that. But there was a detachment of the 7th Cavalry that was under Major Reno and Captain Benteen. They held out until they were relieved by troops from General Terry. Now, having learned that Custer and his command was basically wiped out, Reno surveyed the battlefield and basically said that the fight had been very disorganized and terrified.
Yeah.
Everyone was terrified. They didn't know what was going on. It was all very confusing. So it's one of those periods of history I don't think anyone should be proud of. And again, like the Scottish with the British, you've still got that ongoing battle between the Native Americans and Americans in general, really.
Yeah.
Because they're on reservations and they don't want to be. They want to live the life how they used to live their life, and they can't because of the way it is now. And they have rights, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a different story completely. Now, in the 1940s, reports of that particular battle, Custer's battlefield, they call it, but, stories began to appear around the 1940s.
Right.
Now, in 1976, about 100 years after the battle, visitors reported strange and sudden drops of temperature while standing on Custer Hill, where it was all supposed to happen, and where his body was found following the battle. They heard murmuring sounds like somebody having a conversation, but you couldn't make out the words.
Right.
Yeah, now, this is a visitors area, so you have employees working there and visitors. Now, they claim to have seen mounted Indian warriors near the site, but when they're approached, they disappear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Buildings that are there for the park service, park rangers and that, because you over there, because of the vastness of they have rangers, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, and most of their major battlefields are protected parklands.
Mm-hmm. So in these buildings that have been like put there for the park rangers, they've reported unlocking of doors, lights being turned on when the building is unoccupied, and other strange things happening.
Oh.
One employee reported, this is at the visitor centre that sits near Last Stand Hill, reported seeing an apparition walk through a locked storage room door. Now, that happened just after that particular employee had actually given a presentation on the battle. I need to go to this presentation because clearly I'm not that good at it. On the battle in the centre's basement. And it's increasing. What's interesting about this one, it seems to be increasing. More and more people are reporting various things happening to them when they go to this site. Now, is this happening, really happening, or is it because someone's heard the story, a bit like a urban legend coming to life? So when you go, you have an experience because you're psychologically primed for it? Or is it actually something that's increasing? And if it is increasing, why is it increasing?
It's a difficult one. It's interesting to sort of note that not a lot happened till about 100 years after. Was it 1976 onwards? And you could say that it's that period of time onwards, general interest in the paranormal took hold in the public psyche.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Yeah. So, people are expecting, a lot more people are expecting to see something and, do, basically.
Or, I don't know the area,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it is increasing, which is why you are getting more reports, and nothing to do with the media psychological priming that might be taking place. It might be a double-edged sword on this. You might have a little bit of that, but on the other side of the coin, you might have an actual increase in activity because of maybe geological factors. I don't know. I'm putting it out there.
I think maybe with more people being aware of it and aware of the activity, that could also be giving it more energy.
Possibly, yeah.
I mean, what's that saying that you and the other Kerry used to say about attention and energy?
Energy flows where attention goes.
Yeah.
Is what we used to say.
So if you're giving something your attention, you're increasing its energy.
Yeah.
The same could apply.
Yeah.
Interesting one. It'd be interesting to do. Actually, I think it would be something more one of our American cohorts could probably look into a lot easier in that area. Would be to actually look at it and actually do a proper research on it and see, if there's any, data, I suppose, or just to look into it a bit deeper. Is it increasing or is it a geological phenomena that's occurring? I don't know. Is there more increase in seismic activity in the last 100 years? Or is, bearing in mind, this didn't start until the reports first started coming through in the 1940s, and then by 1976 they seem to be increasing. And then maybe, I don't know if there is or not, maybe there are investigations being done in that area. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out though, wouldn't it, guys?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind going to find out, a trip out to Montana.
Road trip.
Road trip to Montana, everybody. Yeah. To be honest with you guys, if we went to America, we'd be over there years.
Well, I think we would, wouldn't we?
You would have to, wouldn't you?
When are we going?
Yeah, take a couple of years out. Yeah, go for it.
Just to travel around America and check all these things out. There's so many places in America that I'd like to go and actually have a look at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And see, just to understand the scope of it more than anything else. I think this is the biggest thing for us in the UK. In the UK, you can travel across it within 5 hours.
Not even that. Well, down here, because you can travel across it in 5 hours, and you can travel the length of it in about 6 on a good run.
That's the size of one of their parks, guys.
Yeah,
that's our next door neighbour territory, isn't it?
That's about the size of one of their states. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like that's just. So we cannot possibly conceive how big America is. No. Not unless you've seen it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast variety there is over there. You know what I mean? Yes, we've seen a lot in media and like watching the news and but again, it's snapshots, isn't it? Because it's so vast, you can't ever.
It's just
really
like in the UK, if you turn around and go, "Well, I'm just going to nip to the shops," and then you're gone 4 hours, we're on the phone to the police reporting you're missing. Yeah. Over there, it is literally just 4-hour trip there and back.
Yeah,
to the local shop. Yeah,
it's inconceivable to us the distance. So like when we talk to people, I don't know about you guys, but when I talk to people about like when we discussing things like Bigfoot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In my head, I cannot possibly conceive how big and how it could be out there and not be found.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because for me, a wood, you only have to walk half hour and you've crossed a road. Or you've only got to walk half an hour and you bump into a village or a pub. Do you know what I mean? It might be an old haunted pub, guys, but it's still there.
I think you'd be. I had a taste of it when I lived in Australia, and it is vast. Yeah.
Yes, that's another country, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is vast. Once you come away from the shoreline in Australia, I mean, because everyone in Australia sort of lives around the outside bits, sort of close to the coast. Yeah. But you go inland, and it is, it's huge. It just goes on forever.
Yeah, I mean, when I watch these TV shows of like Bigfoot or Missing 411 or something, and the camera pans around, and it is just nothing but a sea of trees. It's just amazing.
And you think when you've got dense coverage in that kind of environment, you lose sense of direction very easily.
Oh, you would if you don't know what you're doing or where you're going. You stray too far off the trail. I mean, you've had it.
I don't think there is a Bigfoot. I think it's just someone that nipped off to the local garage.
To be honest with you, on the way. When we hear accounts in the UK about Bigfoot, I'm more likely can maybe possibly conceive in possibly Scotland, like the Highlands, but anywhere else, I think it's BS. Do you know what I mean? Because you're not going to have a creature of that kind of size.
Yeah.
No, that's right. In the UK, it's not going to happen. All of our woodlands, even our ancient woodlands, you can wander amongst the trees and it's not dense.
Yeah.
Not really. Not like you're talking about in America.
Yeah.
I mean, even the size of the trees. Yeah, all right, we've got some tall trees, but not like, again, they're enormous.
Giant redwoods, yeah.
All right, that's more Canada, isn't it?
Well, no, in America as well, California.
But you get it's inconceivable. So when we talk even down to something like we've talked about Montana, the concept of these are nomadic, the Indians are nomadic.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're driving and needing the space and wanting that land and, to drive them onto the reservations, the distance and the concept of that is inconceivable to me. When I think of English battles, they're incomparable.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult for me to understand the vastness. Again, it's something you'd have to literally go and have a look at to actually get it into your head how challenging. It's a different ball game completely.
Yeah. Totally.
It's unbelievable, really. So let's talk about another one. Let's talk about Yorktown. Small tobacco port on the York River in Virginia, and it was selected as a British supply base by the Earl Cornwallis during the American Revolutionary War. After the French fleet drove off a British fleet near the Virginia Capes, Yorktown became a trap for the British Army. Ha ha ha. Naughty British Army. We were besieged by the combined Continental and French armies, and in the October of 1781, the Americans continuously bombarded the British in and just outside of the town. Now, they targeted the most prominent house that was owned by Thomas Nelson in the belief that the British headquarters was located there, and legend actually has it that Nelson himself suggested that Washington bombarded the house.
Oh, right.
Okay. Now, the house had been used for a time as the headquarters, but the bombardment had actually driven the British senior staff. We're not stupid. We'll move quite easily if we want to, because we've got to stiff upper lip, guys.
That's right.
Absolutely.
We're being a bit bombed here. Let's a bit of move. Just to go elsewhere, to nowhere that they would have thought that we might have been. So, and the Nelson House was actually used as a hospital. The third floor of the imposing house served as a rest area. It was to catch the breezes during the day. That's how hot it gets. So the suffering soldiers had a bit of a breeze, bless them. But sounds of suffering, moans and groans were actually heard over the thunder of the French and American guns. Right, so they're moaning loudly. Now, citizens of Yorktown actually sought shelter from this bombardment in caves. Love a cave, mate.
Yeah, a nice little cave, along the banks of the York River.
Yeah, lovely.
Once the British surrendered the post, the American army returned to the positions on the Hudson River and in New Jersey, leaving behind in place fortifications and entrenchments that they had built during the siege. These were used again in a later war by the Confederate Army during the Peninsula Campaign.
See, right. I don't like the term that we, what was it? We
surrendered?
Surrendered. Yeah, no, we didn't surrender. We just merely advanced in a different direction.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better, isn't it? I mean, no, we don't surrender.
What is funny is the Confederate Army used fake guns. They made them of logs to fool the Union commander, George McClellan, into believing that they were actually stronger than they were.
Yeah.
So he delayed.
And it worked.
It worked. He delayed his advancement, should we say. And the Confederates actually withdrew to the Richmond area. Love it. Now, the caves are now known as the Cornwallis Caves, and Nelson House has been reported to have been haunted. Again, you get the moans and the groans and the sounds of pain, but these have been limited to the third floor, which is where they would house the people to have a bit of a breeze.
Right.
Spectral images have also been seen in the windows at night. Scary place.
Yeah.
Now, the caves themselves were enlarged into a single cavern by smugglers. Now, they're now secured with gates, so don't even bother trying to get into them. But ghostly sounds have been heard from the site, both by people walking in the area and from people on the river themselves.
All right.
Cool.
Spooky.
Yeah. Particularly you can't go find out what it is. Now, George Washington's stepson, John Parke Custis, he died during the siege. He died of typhus, again, that nasty little typhus bug. And basically the medical attention he received, so it wasn't really the best of medical attention. And his spirit has been reported to have been seen, complete with bandages.
Cool.
Stained bandages at that.
Yeah.
And he's searching apparently across the battle lines as if he's searching for his stepfather. He was an aide to his stepfather.
He's probably looking for his contact lens, really.
Now, several other spectral redcoats have been seen fleeing from the area of the British front lines towards the towns.
Right.
And actually goes from the Civil War era, when Nelson House was used as a hospital, have also been seen in and around the house at night. So again, quite a haunted little area, that one.
Yeah, quite a crossover there, isn't it? Two conflicts happening in the same area.
Yeah, and reported hauntings from both.
Yeah.
So what would be interesting is the accounts you get. It would be interesting to ask the question, what do you know most about? What conflict do you know about?
Yeah.
The most? And actually, is your sighting in line with what you know, or is it actually something that you didn't know, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Although I have to say, I do get a little bit confused with American history.
Right.
Personally. I thought it was all one war. It's not.
No, the American Revolution and the Civil War, two different wars.
Yeah, I thought it was the same thing. So I've learned something today.
Yeah.
Yes.
So where are we going to go to next? Are we going to do Gettysburg, or does that come a bit later? Or
I think that comes a bit later.
Right. Okay.
We're going to Georgia next.
Georgia. Savannah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hang on, I've scrolled too far now. I was looking for Gettysburg. God. Right, Savannah is the northern counterpart of Gettysburg, and it is called the most haunted city in America.
Right. Now we're getting somewhere.
We have haunted pubs in every town. You have got the most haunted city. It's the site of the second bloodiest siege of the American Revolution, but it's one that's the least studied.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not.
Ooh.
Polish nobleman Casimir Pulaski was amongst its casualties, and he is supposed to have haunted some of the famous city squares.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Revolutionary War hero, Mr. Quaker himself, Nathaniel Green, was buried in Savannah following the war, and his spirit and that of his son has been encountered by people when approaching a monument that was erected in his memory.
Mm-hmm.
And this was after his grave was actually vandalised during the Civil War. He was like, "Don't you touch my monument."
Yeah.
I'm going to stand here and watch guards and scare everybody.
Let's face it, we'd all do that.
Well, yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? It sounds like fun, right?
Yeah, totally.
The British actually, oh God, us British, we got everywhere, didn't we? The British occupied Savannah early in the war, and in 1779, a joint French and American force attacked the city from the west. They hoped to capture it quickly through assault rather than siege, right? When the first assault failed, American and French forces laid the city under siege. So they went, sod it, we'll just siege you instead.
Yeah,
that began in mid-September, and by October, the French fleet was running low on supplies and, oh gosh, started to have scurvy amongst the crews. That's not a good thing to have.
No.
Now, they wanted the siege to end as quickly as possible, and the French and the American ground forces assaulted the British barracks, but were repulsed. We threw them back. There were heavy losses amongst the French and Americans, amongst them the Pulaski, an American sergeant named William Jasper. Years later, a statue memorializing even William Jasper was erected in the Madison Square.
Mm.
And the ghost of Mr. William Jasper has been seen many times in his revolutionary uniform moving about Madison Square. Basically, still fighting the British, everybody.
Yeah.
Now, there are other reports of apparitions. Apparently, us British are still there as well.
Yeah.
We're still having a go. So, in a way, it's almost like you've got these two sides. You've got the ghosts of the French and the Americans and the ghosts of the British, almost still holding ground, as it were.
Yeah, still jostling for position.
Yeah, bless him. Now, what's really interesting about Pulaski, he was actually hastily buried, obviously, because the American and French abandoned the siege and withdrew. His gravesite was unknown for many years, but a statue was erected, obviously, in Monterey Square, which is what we've talked about.
Yeah.
Now, in 1996, the statue was renovated, and in the process was discovered to contain a box. And in the box was skeletal remains.
Oh, right.
Right? Now, they did do DNA testing on this. Now, that proved to be inconclusive, but the bones bore marks consistent with what Pulaski's wounds were supposed to have been.
Oh, right. So,
Now, yeah, and that's why the locals think that's why he's haunted there, because that's where his actual bones are, where he's buried.
Okay.
That's where he's buried.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Now, Matthew Green and his son was actually interred side by side in the Colonial Park Cemetery, and their grave locations were later lost. The monument to Green's memory was erected in Johnson Square. They've got a lot of squares in Savannah, haven't they?
Oh, yeah.
And in 1900s, the graves of Green and his son were actually discovered. They moved their remains to Johnson Square, and according to many of the citizens, that's why his ghost is there.
Oh, so he's
fed up that he was actually moved.
Oh.
Can't keep moving people's bodies, you know. Don't know, do they? Were they going to be? I was there yesterday, and now I'm over here. What's going on?
Yeah,
Bit confusing. You can imagine it. Poor, bless them, bless them, bless them, bless their little hearts. Right, we can't go much further without talking about Gettysburg itself, right?
I know,
Yeah.
I know Paul wanted this one, didn't he? So
he did want this one, yeah. Now, this was... Now, I have friends that live and work in this area, and it's a huge tourist area.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Now, it is.
Big national park. Yeah.
It's huge. And there is so many paranormal occurrences that allegedly happen in this area, right? People have experiences to this day. Now, the Battle of Gettysburg was the largest ever fought on the North American continent. It was fought between July the 1st to the 3rd in 1863. It produced the greatest number of casualties of any battle of the war and was the high watermark of the Confederacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the furthest they actually managed to get into the North.
Mm-hmm. The South was decisively defeated, and for the rest of the war, the Army of Northern Virginia fought in a defensive posture.
Yeah, they never really sort of recovered from it.
Combined casualties of the battle were around 50,000 men. Around 8,000 of those were dead.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more died later of their wounds. Having said that, there were only 2 civilian casualties, a young woman named Ginny Wade. She was killed by a stray bullet. And a 69-year-old war veteran. He fought actually as a volunteer for the Union. He was wounded, but he did survive. But they were the only 2 civilian casualties, which is pretty damn good going, quite frankly, guys.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that.
Yeah. Now, most of the dead were actually buried on Cemetery Hill, where some of the Union troops had made their stand during the battle. Others were buried in local church cemeteries near the field hospitals where they died, and there are other locations around. Many did go unburied for an extended period of time, as their bodies were undiscovered. You know, this is a massive area. A lot of dead
woodland, people. Undergrowth and stuff. Yeah, people would have crawled off and expired.
It would have taken a while. It would have taken a while to find all the bodies. Now, when the Gettysburg National Cemetery was created, most of the Union dead were reinterred there, and that's where Lincoln, when he went to Gettysburg in 1863, he delivered his Gettysburg address there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But by then, there was already talk of paranormal activity in that area.
Oh, right. So it sort of came up sort of quite soon after the battle then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then wasn't Abraham Lincoln interested in the paranormal?
He was. His wife was quite into that. Well, she was supposed to be a psychic, wasn't she? And he was supposed to have had visions and stuff like that. But I don't think he went there because of the reports of paranormal activity. He went there to rally his troops. And
I bet he did. I bet he was like, I'm really excited to go to Gettysburg tomorrow. It's amazing. The paranormal activity is off the scale. Oh, and I've got to do a speech.
Now, I think this goes back a bit further because even whilst the battle was going on, there were reports of ghostly apparitions. One of the tales was that of a phantom on a horseback, and the story was that as the 20th Maine Regiment, that was led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, he actually ended up getting a Medal of Honor for his actions on that day.
Yeah, famous action he fought.
Yeah.
Day,
he was guided up the slopes of the Little Round Top by the apparition of a man. He was uniformed in blue and buff of the Revolutionary War. He said the phantom was mounted on a white horse, had a glowing aura surrounding him, and appeared to be George Washington. I've heard stories about George Washington's ghost before as well, on this one, appearing to people. Now, George Washington was a Virginian and a slave owner, but that doesn't seem to have worried.
No, doesn't seem to be of consideration. Yeah.
No, I don't think that's. It's just he's helping the Americans, whatever way he wanted to. I've also heard other stories about George Washington's ghost. Now, following the battle, there were reports of spectral figures roaming the battlefield. But again, you've got to look at the stress of a battlefield, right? Yeah. At Devil's Den, barefoot figures have been reported as appearing before visitors to inform them that what they seek is over there, and points in the direction of the Plum Run Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Other visitors have reported encountering an older, dishevelled figure asking if they have any spare rounds.
Right.
Okay.
And at the nearby Daniel Lady Farm, that was used by the Confederates as a field hospital, it's reportedly haunted by ghosts of quite a few people that died there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Sachs Covered Bridge is claimed that the covered bridges, they have them in America, don't they?
Yeah, we don't have them here. There's funny, yeah. Whenever you think of rural America, you always think of covered bridges, don't you?
In my head, I have that film, The Hollow.
Oh, Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman.
Yeah, they have a covered bridge in that.
Yeah,
and whenever I hear of a covered bridge in my head, that's what pops up.
Yeah.
Where was we? I got caught on bridges.
Yeah, we're still there.
Now that Sachs Covered Bridge,
yeah,
back to the bridge, was haunted by ghosts of several soldiers and has glowing orbs and wraith-like figures. Now, do you remember we talked about the casualties, the citizen casualties even?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 20-year-old Ginny Wade, sometimes called Jenny. That was the girl that got stray bulleted.
Yeah. Hit by a stray bullet, yeah.
She's said to be prowling. Her restless spirit prowls around. And ghosts have been widely reported in and around the Doubleday Inn, where a group of Confederates from North Carolina were killed.
Right.
Lots, again, you've got this conversation going, but can't make out the words going on. But you can tell the accent, the drawl.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently they've got like a regional accent of...
Yeah.
And you can make that out, but you can't make out what they're saying.
Right.
Lots and lots and lots of reported activity. We've spoken to people that have been there or work in that area, and they all say the same. They've all had experiences.
Yeah.
In Gettysburg.
It certainly seems to be a hotbed of activity.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, what's interesting to me is Gettysburg is one of the ones where you can discount quartz as being a factor for stone tape theory.
Oh.
Because there is no quartz in that area.
No. Right.
Nope. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's, all right, so if it isn't that, then what is it? It's not water. It's not that. It's not this. Do you know what I mean? So this is the problem we have, isn't it, with paranormal activity? And we talked about this many, many times. We talked about there's not one answer fits all.
No,
Yeah.
you sort of, if you hang your hat on water theories, say, I mean, and there's always somewhere in the literature that totally flies in its face, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're wanted for a believer in quartz, you go to Gettysburg, but there's no quartz in the underlying strata.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's granite, actually, at Gettysburg. You've got Devil's Den, which is like a big boulders.
Well, granite does have a quartz content, to be fair, but not crystalline structure.
No.
It's part of the granite.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like that point then gets argued. Well, there is quartz because it's in the granite.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So you go, okay, so that's fine. All right. Okay, I take that. Microcosmically small crystalline structure of quartz is in that area. I will go with that. All right, on a minute microcosmic level. But again, you've got to look at how it gets recorded.
Yeah.
What are the mechanisms of that? Where does it get stored? How is the replay then triggered? Do you know what I mean? So you can't just go, well, it's recorded in the local environment. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's fine. How? How is it recorded? How is it stored? How is it triggered to be replayed? You know, those are the fundamentals of that particular theory. So
yeah.
Which you can't explain. You can't explain that to me. I can't explain it. I'm not that clever. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to look at that. Now, Gettysburg is interesting because, you know, it also seems to be a trigger for people who have latent psychic abilities and they go to Gettysburg and then all of a sudden something triggers and then they have experiences and then they move. When they've left Gettysburg, those experiences continue. And we're not talking about like, we hear this with like once somebody's had a ufology experience, then they keep on having ufology experiences or, you know, it's on a psychic level.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked to several people over the years that this allegedly has happened to, you know, whether you believe them or not, that's up to you guys. You know, people can only talk about their own experience. You know, so what is going on with battlefields? Is it the trauma that they've experienced? Is it the emotional energy signature that's being left by? It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because whatever one you want to look at, whatever way you want to look at it, is it psychological priming because we know a big battle took place in there and we're not stupid, we know how traumatic battles are, and when we know our history, we know how brutal and savage they can be, and we also know atrocities that have occurred in specific wars. Do you know what I mean? Is it that? But then having said that, we talk about something like, if you want to look at it in that argument, you go, right, okay, well, there was no bigger pressure point in history than maybe the death camps in World War II, and yet people do not report paranormal occurrences happening. No. They say that they had a weird feeling, or, you know, the no birds were singing, it's eerie, but no one reports seeing ghosts of inmates that are there. You don't hear of those, which, if that's what was going on, surely you would have that there too. Does that make sense, or am I off on a tangent?
No, it does make sense, but yeah, it's certainly.
What's interesting to me is it all seems very focused on America and England, and when you think of things like the Boer War, we don't hear accounts coming out from those countries to do with battlefields that took place, and some of those were absolutely horrific.
Well, yeah, the Boer War, in places, but there's probably local accounts that probably just haven't filtered down.
I'd like to hear more from those kind of continents.
Yeah,
but then
their
belief system, their underlying cultural belief systems are very different.
Yeah.
To Western society. And is that what makes the difference in the ghost stories that come through?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, they could be more to do with location and the Northern European psyche as regards ghosts.
Throwing another thing into the pot of mix of thought patterns here, when we were looking at of the unfortunate tsunami that happened in Japan.
Yeah,
there were reports, a lot of people reporting that they were having paranormal occurrences and were being guided by the local I'm going to call them priests. That's not the right name for them, but to inform the spectres that they were encountering that they unfortunately had died and they need to move on. Because the traumatic event happened so quickly that people didn't realise that they were dead, so they were going home.
Yeah.
So people were having occurrences. And it was allegedly through spirits that, didn't realise they were dead.
Yeah.
So when you look at these things, when you pass that quickly, do you become disjointed from the natural spiritual progression because you aren't accepting of that because it happens so quickly? There's a period of time of acceptance.
Yeah.
That's very possible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were looking at how quickly does the spirit pass over, and there's a lot of belief system that it's even under natural circumstances, it takes a couple of days to pass, which is why they have windows, windows open so the soul can pass.
Yeah, there's the soul can go out, or they say some. Some say it takes about 3 days, doesn't it, for the spirit to leave the body, and there's all sorts of different.
There's lots of different belief systems on that. And if it takes that time to pass under natural circumstances, if you've passed under traumatic circumstance, could it be that you take longer than, bearing in mind time is not necessarily the same concept as it is in our physical, in our physical reality. So for them, it might only seem like a couple of days, and it's actually been like 50 years. Who knows? I don't know. It throws interesting concepts to me onto the table when we look at these kind of alleged hauntings. And I do think if they're anniversary hauntings, there should be hundreds of paranormal investigators on the anniversaries of these places at these battlefields, surely.
Yeah, surely, yeah.
Missing a trick, guys. It's free.
Yeah.
Got the date and everything, guaranteed. Anniversary haunting. You could take the Battle of Culloden. You could have a coordinated paranormal investigation covering the entire area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To capture alleged paranormal activity. But no one seems to do it.
No,
it's like the odd person.
Yeah.
Funny that.
It is, isn't it?
Much rather go to a scary old building, right?
Yeah, with a roof.
With a roof.
Yeah.
And cups of tea on.
Yeah, some of it doesn't get too cold.
Yeah. Anyway, we've come to the end of the show.
That's gone quick.
That was quick.
It has. Interesting one, though.
Very.
Yeah, enjoyed that one.
I think whatever way you want to look at it on this one, I mentioned it towards the end of the first half of the show. People have experiences. Listen to them, record it, and don't dismiss it, because you never know. They may have had a genuine paranormal encounter. On that note, say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.